the Football Mental Health Alliance podcast, a mental health podcast for grassroots football. Our aim, to boldly delve into the intersection of mental health and football. We feature notable experts and ex-pros who are not afraid to share their wisdom and personal journeys with mental health.
Right then, really proud today to have Jake Mills on as a guest of the Football Mental Health Alliance podcast, award-winning comedian and founder of the Hub of Hope, something that we champion massively here, what we're doing. So Jake, thanks so much. Would you like to just introduce yourself, please, buddy?
Yeah, no, thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be on this, and yeah, big support of everything that you're doing and how important it is. Yeah, so I mean, to introduce myself, as you said there, a comedian, but then the founder of a charity, a national charity, and something like the Hub of Hope. It's been a bit of a journey to go from one to the other, but yeah, it's been a journey in which I've learned an awful lot about myself. You know, people often ask me, how do you go from being a comedian to being the founder of a national mental health charity? Well, you know, in truth, it was purely my own lived experience and struggling with my mental health. But crucially, I knew nothing about that. So you know, I had a very normal life, you know, a happy life with friends and family and relationship and going to school and university. But I just started to struggle with my mental health, and what I can look back at now as being depression and anxiety. But the important thing is I had no idea. Nobody had ever taught me about mental health. Nobody had ever told me about signs and symptoms of good mental health, never mind poor mental health. Nobody told me about the things that you could do if you started to not feel yourself, if you started to feel unwell. And so I just tried just to get on with it. I thought it was a bit of a me problem. I thought it was a bit of a, I'm not as good at coping as everybody else. So I didn't tell anyone because I felt embarrassed about telling anyone, because I thought they'd say, well, yeah, everyone feels that way and we're just better at it. And long story short, I tried to bottle all of that up too much for too long, and that actually led to a suicide attempt 10 years ago this year. And you know, I never thought I'd be in that situation, but I genuinely felt like it was something I had no control or choice over. And what happened then was that I started to speak publicly about what I'd gone through, and my story got picked up in the press, and it started going to a lot of different organisations and media outlets, and I was asked to go on television and radio and in newspapers, and my story was getting shared by people like James Corden and Emma Watson, going to tens of millions of people. But what happened is every single time I gave an interview, every single time it was shared, every time it went anywhere, people got in touch with me, and people got in touch with me asking me for help.
Yeah.
And the reason they were getting in touch with me and asking me for help was because, not because I was saying I done this and I got better. I think people were getting in touch with me because I was explaining only how I felt, but it resonated with them. What I was describing of my signs and my symptoms, and you know, all these things with poor mental health, people going, oh, I thought I was the only one who felt like that. So when people started getting in touch, they were asking me for help. They were asking me for advice. They were asking me for, what do I do? They were worried about themselves. They were worried about somebody else. And the truth was that I knew nothing about how to get help. I wasn't somebody who had been unwell, went somewhere, got support, got better. You know, I reached the lowest of the low point that I possibly could. So for me, there was a bit of a moment, a bit of a light bulb moment, when I was like, okay, I thought I was the only one who felt like this, and I realize I'm not the only one who feels like this. A lot of other people feel like they're the only ones, and I've got to be able to find how to find help and support for these people.
Yeah.
And so that's why I created a charity called Chasing the Stigma. And what we wanted to do as a charity was to really normalize that conversation, to talk like people, to just have a normal face, a normal voice, or faces and voices of people who talk like people. But crucially, we wanted to make that help and support as easy to find. And that's where the Hub of Hope came from. So the Hub of Hope, for anyone who doesn't know, is a directory of mental health services. And we wanted to make it as easy as finding a takeaway. You know, you can go on an app to find a takeaway anywhere in the country. You can see what's available. You can make a decision based on what you feel you want that day. And we wanted to make that take that same concept, but putting it into mental health support, because there's a narrative at the moment. Well, don't get me wrong, mental health provision is massively underfunded. It's not fit for purpose, you know, generally. You know, there's waiting lists, there's thresholds, it's not right. But sometimes we can confuse that with thinking that there's no help available, that there's no hope, and there is. So we wanted to make a database and a directory of services and bring together all these services in one place. So you can be anywhere in the country. You can download the Hub of Hope as a free app, or go on the website. You can type in a city, a town, a postcode, or nothing at all. Just press find nearby services, and it will just use your location and pinpoint the nearest local support to you. And what started as a list on the kitchen table of a couple of services is now over 13,500 services, and that is growing constantly. And it's now the biggest of its kind, and it's used by hundreds of thousands of people. And every single time we see any numbers, any analytics of people using the app, we know it's people who are in need, looking for support, and hopefully being able to find that support of all different kinds. So yeah, it's been a hell of a journey over the last 10 years.
It's immense, Jake. It's immense. The Hub of Hope is immense. And I'm not just saying this because we're talking now. Every time I have a meeting about what we're doing, you know, and they're all, you know, Teams and Zoom meetings now, share my screen and I show them the Hub of Hope, and I talk them through the Hub of Hope. I do them a guided tour of how easy it is to find what you need. So I'll say to them, what's your postcode? They'll give me their postcode. I'll hit enter. I'll then choose, you know, a mental health topic, if that's the term. Click it, boom. And I'll say, look, it shows you how far away it is, when it opens and closes, how to find it, links. It is immense, Jake. And again, I'm not just saying that. It is bloody brilliant. And for me, it's one of the best kept secrets in mental health. And that is, you know, more people need to know about it. And I'm not saying people don't know about it. It is just that good. It should be on everyone's phone, because, as you said, we've all got mental health.
We do, and I really appreciate that, because you know what, sometimes we don't really hear from people who use it, because people go on it and hopefully find help and then never go on it again, never need to contact us, and that's something that, you know, we're absolutely more than happy for that to happen. So, but when we do hear about that and hear someone like yourself talking about it, it does make us proud. And it is immense. You know, in the effort that the team have gone into to have a directory of so big and growing so much, and over a short amount of time as well. But it is the most simple thing.
Yes.
It's the most simple idea. So
just going to say that
the energy, the effort, the time, the work that's gone into it has been immense, and I'm so proud of everyone who's played a part in that. But it is not rocket science. It's the most simple idea, bringing everything together in one place. And you know, from the day that we started the Hub of Hope, I've always expected somebody, certainly in those first few months, I expected somebody to pick up the phone and go, we've already done this, you know, because it's one of those ideas that when you start it, you go, why doesn't this exist?
Yeah.
So, and you're right, it is a bit of a best kept secret, but we don't want that. So, that's our next aim, really, is to get this out there, become a household name, everybody having it on the phones, on the tablets or computers. So we hope you never have to use it. But if you're ever in a situation when you're worried about yourself, somebody else, having a conversation, it's there. You've got it.
I think I agree with you. I think it's not just about using it for yourself, is it? It's also about knowing it's there and, you know, referring someone else to it, or maybe using it when you're with them, you know. So if you are in a, you know, shall we say, a mental health conversation, which that carries a hell of a lot of responsibility, you've got something there which takes that responsibility off you. Because I think the thing with mental health is people might say, well, I'm not a psychologist, I'm not a counsellor, I'm not trained, I don't know what to do. And I get that. It's scary when you're talking about mental health, when you're experiencing it. But the Hub of Hope, and this is what I say to people, the Hub of Hope takes that responsibility of the worry of, am I doing the right thing? The Hub of Hope does it for you. If you can lead someone to that app, to that website, and to that first step of putting in their postcode, the Hub of Hope does the rest for them. And that is the beauty of it.
That and you're absolutely spot on in that. I do genuinely believe that probably the biggest reason why people avoid that conversation, even when they're genuinely worried about somebody, the biggest reason people avoid that conversation about mental health is because they don't know what to do next. And it's very valid. It's a really valid thing, because just talking about mental health is just part of that whole bigger picture. So you're absolutely right. It's saying, if you are worried about somebody, or you're having a conversation, or somebody comes to you, and being able to say, listen, I'm not an expert, but here's where the experts are going. You know, it's good that you've spoken about this. It's good that we've had this conversation. Now you can go and find help and support, and that's exactly what it's there to do.
Yeah, I think it's you know, we do mental health first aid training. And part of that is part of mental health first aid training is not diagnosing people, because that's not what it's about. It's about, you know, identifying signs and signposting. And the signposting, what we'll say is Hub of Hope. It's the perfect, you know, because what I think the Hub of Hope does is it allows people to sort of educate themselves as well, in a sense where, you know, you've got all the options of how, you know, what do you need support with. It's so simple that you can sort of tell you can understand yourself what you need and click a button. So I think there's a very element of education in what the Hub of Hope does, that it makes people stop and think and go, well, yeah, I am feeling anxious, and it is about this. And you can click two things, hit go, and it's there in front of you, and you can think, well, that's only, you know, 1.2 miles away. Click a button, I'll get in touch with them.
Yeah,
closes in 3 hours. It's immense, mate, and I'm not just saying that.
No, thank you. And I think, you know, I've always said, I honestly believe it's just as important knowing about the support that's available and never using it than it is using the support. I think knowing about it, you know, you might just be not feeling great, not feeling 100%, maybe having a couple of low days or weeks, but you might think, I don't actually need help and support right now. But having a look and going, but if I reach a point when I do feel like I need support, I know where it is. I think, you know, just having that knowledge, that understanding of there is support, and when I feel like I need to go and get it, I at least now know where it is.
Yeah. It's a bit like having sort of insurance for your car, isn't it? You know, you sort of, you know, hope you're never going to need it, but you know where it is if you do need it. Or joining the AA. I'm not being flippant about the subject we're talking about, but, you know, you might join the AA thinking, well, I hope I never need them, but if my car breaks down or I have a flat tire, I can contact them and they'll come and help me. So can we just rewind back then 10 years and then talk about how old were you when you started feeling a deterioration in your mental health?
It's hard to say exactly, but I was 24 at the time of the suicide attempt. So probably I would say, in hindsight, looking back, I probably had about 12 to 18 months at least of struggling with depression and anxiety. And really, if you kind of, you know, as you start learning more about the the subject matter and you start learning more about mental health generally. I probably struggled with my mental health as a child.
Yeah.
I was an anxious child, and you know, when you start like looking back at things and learning things, having conversations with my parents, and you know, my mum in particular carries a lot of guilt, which I don't think she should, but you know, just obviously with how things when she carries guilt about, you know, I never wanted to go to groups, or I was always anxious about going to, you know, football camps, for example. When I was there, I liked it, but I always got so worked up about these things. And I think, you know, back then it was always a case of just get on with it, you'll get over it type of thing. There was never conversation about anxiety.
No.
Separation anxiety, you know, school trips or whatever. So there's possibly something in childhood that, you know, we never really knew.
I think as parents though, Jake, sorry to interrupt you, I think as parents though, you know, you always try and do best for your child, and you try and not push them, but help them to experience uncomfortable situations to show them that they can overcome it and nothing's ever as bad as what you think it is. So obviously I don't know your mum and your parents and stuff, but as a parent myself, that's what I do to my son. You know, I try and, you know, I think, you know, I try and say to him, you've got to try and, you know, learn to be comfortable being uncomfortable. And I don't mean that constantly. So, you know, I can see what you know, that parallel in what you're saying and how I am with my son.
Yeah, and it's hard because, you know, I have that situation now where my son is almost 8, and you know, I was always, when we were trying to get him to go to clubs and stuff, and he would get so worked up, and I'd just be like, part of you just going, just go and you'll enjoy it and then you'll be okay, and party's going, right, is this too much now? And it's hard, it is so hard as a parent. So that's why I in no way, shape or form blame my parents for anything at all. But what it possibly did show was that maybe I was struggling with anxiety or something else as a child. But so when I was probably about 22, 23, and as I said, the suicide attempt was as I was 24. So, you know, there was a time when you're coming to terms with being an adult, you're coming to terms with life pressures and different relationship issues and money and career and all of these things.
Adult responsibilities.
Yeah, absolutely. And it was really like, you know, there wasn't really any one particular thing. There wasn't any like straw that broke the camel's back as such. It was just that life and maybe finding that I couldn't cope and was trying to find other ways of coping, which probably were unhealthy, and drinking and other things like that. And it was just, it was something that I never knew I could get help with. It was never anything that I tried to seek that support. And so you feel like you're having to deal with it yourself, and then you end up bottling it, and it all comes out one way or another then.
So what were the unhealthy coping strategies that you you know, fell into?
So it was I definitely drank more than I should have. I wouldn't say that I became dependent on drink, but I definitely used drink as a way of, you know, being able to cope. I thought that maybe if I have a drink or you know, a few drinks, I can be me, I can be around people, I can forget these things. And then that just it spirals, you know, it spirals into generally not looking after yourself at all. It becomes you know, an issue with your physical health, just absolute, for me anyway, deteriorated. So not only was my mental health deteriorating, but my physical health was completely deteriorating. I ended up absolutely loathing myself because of both of those things. And when you're in that situation, it is a vicious cycle. You know, you wake up, you feel worse than the night before, so you'd end up going back into that cycle to every day felt like just trying to cover up. And it's really, really hard, and breaking that cycle from an outside point of view can seem really simple. But when you're in that cycle, it feels impossible.
Yeah.
It feels impossible.
Like I think, like, humans are creatures of habit as well. So when you get into like a cycle of bad habits, as you've said, it just becomes perpetual, doesn't it? And then those people that are in a cycle of good habits, that go from the bad habits to the good habits, it then becomes habitual for them to eat right, exercise, meditate, be gratitude, be grateful and things. So, but it is so difficult, Jake, in any cycle that you're in, to break it, because we are creatures of habit, I believe.
It is. I agree with you, and it's important to recognize that it's not one or the other as well. So that was my example of being unhealthy coping mechanism. You can have the absolute opposite. You can have the literal opposite, where a coping mechanism is being the opposite of exercising too much, of being looking at food and diet and eating in an unhealthy way. It can be the absolute polar opposite, and I think that's why when we talk about mental health, and particularly poor mental health, it is such a complex thing, that it's not what you see is not what you get. And it can be really hard for people to understand and to be compassionate with somebody in their situation, because it can be so different to everything that you've ever expected. Like right now, I know physical exercise is absolutely crucial for me to stay well. And it gets to a point where I need a routine. And to just, I'm working for the charity full time. It's a national charity which requires me to travel nationally. And if my exercise routine is affected by that, it affects me. And I can look ahead and go, oh no, in 4 weeks time, I can't go to the gym once that week. And it'll make me anxious for all that time. So, as I said, it's not just because you're not exercising and you're eating rubbish and you're drinking. If you're doing the opposite of that, that can be problematic as well. So everybody is different. Everybody's coping mechanisms are different. Everybody's triggers are different. Everybody's healthy and unhealthy are completely different, and that's why it makes it so hard to have this conversation, because there's not a one size fits all.
No. Well, I say, like, I say to people that mental health's like your fingerprint, completely unique to you, so whatever works for one person. And it goes back to that, what you said at the start about, well, you just get on with it, and I'm okay with this, so you should be. But you don't know what's going on inside someone's head or personality or body, what triggers might affect them that other people might just not even recognize, or it mightn't even register with them. And because we're so different, and that's what makes us so interesting, I think, that we're also different, we're also individual. And the one thing that sticks with me is, you never know what's going through, what people are experiencing, so just be kind. And it's trotted out into it all the time, and you've got that be kind hashtag, but it is so simple. Like you said about the hubba hub, you don't know what someone's going through. I see people, you see them and you think, God, that guy looks a bit stressed, or that lady looks a bit stressed and pressured, and and you just think, you don't know what's going on in people's lives, do you, Jake?
No, you don't. And I think that is what's really difficult, is that we often, as people, we can judge people by our own standards. We can look at people and think, why would you do that, or why would you act like that, or why, whatever, because you're judging it on your own standards, on your own methods, on your own ethic, or whatever that might be. And I think generally and historically, when it comes to a conversation about mental health, people have historically had this automatic reaction that is, they're taking the mick, or they're making it up, or they're exaggerating. And I think that's because it comes down to what you believe, and how you work, and what your standards are. And I think it's not about, none of this is about anyone taking the mick. None of this is about anybody exaggerating. This is just about everybody works, deals, responds, reacts, operates in their own unique way. And you can show compassion and kindness to somebody while still having standards, while still having expectations, while not dismissing bad behavior or excusing bad behavior, for example. You can still have those standards, but it's treating people with compassion, it's treating people with kindness, and it's doing it in a way that is making people feel like supported.
Yeah.
And that support, listen to, supported, and that support doesn't mean that you have to take on the responsibility. I often talk about how I felt when I was really struggling was completely lonely and isolated. And people could look at me and go, well, you had loads of friends, you had a really lovely, happy relationship with your girlfriend, you've got family, you know, living at home with your parents who are loving and look after you. How could you feel lonely? And the reason I felt lonely was because I was feeling something, and I was going through something that was completely internal, and I felt like I can't tell them because I thought I don't want them to know, I don't want them to worry, I don't want any of this. So the feeling of isolation, the feeling of loneliness wasn't that I was on my own. It was carrying this burden alone, not telling anyone, feeling I have to deal with it every day, going, what am I going to do? That feeling of loneliness, that feeling of isolation was a lot more than what it would have looked like. And I think just showing kindness, showing compassion, being there from a supportive point of view doesn't mean you have to take that person's problems on, but it's just saying you're not on your own. You know, there's somebody there. And to go back to the point that we made before, if you did show somebody that kindness and that compassion, and they then say, well, actually, I'm feeling this way, you don't have to take that responsibility on, but then you can say, well, here's the help and support that's available.
I think it is. Again, it's another cliche, but people say it's okay to talk and it helps, and it does. It does. It's like that the magic bullet that is the thing that's right in front of your face. You know, that you don't have to go digging for. You don't have to read textbooks about. You don't have to Google it. It's right in front of your face. Open your mouth, but it is the hardest thing to do when you're struggling with anything. I think it is, and some people, I'm certainly one of them. I'm a bit of a closed book. I deal with everything internally, and I've just always been like that, to the point that there's some stuff I don't even say to my wife, and she'll say to me, "It's a bit for, you know, I know I'm here, just talk to me, you know." And it could be anything, big, small, medium. I just deal with stuff myself because I've just I compartmentalize inside myself, and I've said to her, I said, I know in some respects that isn't healthy, because it's like you would alluded to in your journey, that it just builds up and builds up and builds up, and sometimes it then becomes a volcano that erupts and can cover everything in lava, metaphorically. So we'll just go back to when you were suffering with your mental health. Where did that lead you to? Where, when you say you're at the lowest point, how did that happen, and what was it?
Yeah, well, the lowest point was reaching the point when I thought I can't live with this anymore, because the problem is, because I'd never had any education around it, because I'd never had any conversations around poor mental health, I didn't think it was something that I could get help for. So when you're living with this feeling every day, getting on, trying your best, covering up, just to get through the day, I think that's what it felt like most of the time, was just get through this day. And that's really exhausting, because when you get to the end of that day, then you've got to do it again. And that's
bit like Groundhog Day.
Absolutely. And you think, right, okay, I've got through that. And I didn't know that there was any alternative. I didn't know that there was any help. I didn't know that there was anybody else who felt that way. I genuinely didn't think that I would ever be me again, that I'd be happy. I just didn't think I'd be happy. And so it reached the point when it kind of just made sense for me from every angle, from myself, from my girlfriend, from my parents, from friends, from family, my sister, everyone. If I thought, if I take myself out of the equation, then they won't have to worry, and then they can get on with stuff, because I knew that they knew that I wasn't right. I knew that they were worried about me.
Yeah.
But I was like, what's the point in worrying about me, because there's nothing anyone can do.
Yeah.
And so I reached a point where I actually attempted to take my own life, and I never doubted it at all. It just made absolute sense. And luckily, I'm still here. But I would say that the turning point, for me, was actually, and I wish it wasn't this. I wish there was a better story here. But I think the turning point for me was reaching that suicide attempt, because I was saved by chance by my girlfriend at the time, who is now my wife. I was saved by chance. She found me. I don't know how she knew where I was, but she found me. And that was the most vulnerable I've ever been, because I didn't know, I had to face what I was about to do, and how upset my parents and girlfriend and everybody was about that. I didn't know if I was going to be ever get better. I didn't know if it was going to affect jobs. I didn't know, like, the police had to come to see me. I didn't know if I had a criminal record. I didn't know how I was possibly going to move on from this. But the difference was, and why I say it was the turning point, was because I'd lied and covered up and pretended and hid for so long. I didn't tell anybody anything about any of these feelings, thoughts, what I was doing, where I was going, who I was with, how I was coping, all of these things. And suddenly it was there. It was out on the table. There was no hiding place. But the reaction from everybody, from those closest to me, the reaction was the opposite of the reason why I hid, the reason why I lied, the reason why I didn't share. It wasn't, they weren't angry at me, they weren't upset at me, they believed me.
Yeah.
They didn't know what to do. They were upset, but they weren't upset at me.
Yeah.
They were upset with the situation. They didn't know what to do, but they were honest with me, and they reassured me, and they showed me love and compassion and support, and they said, we don't know what to do, but we will do absolutely everything that we can. And all those things, all those worries, all those reasons why I'd say, don't tell them, don't tell them, don't tell them, they all, I'm not going to pretend that they just vanished overnight, but the weight was lifted.
Yeah.
The weight of that pretense that I'd carried for what felt like forever was lifted. I didn't know what I was going to do.
Yeah.
But I knew that I wasn't alone. So that feeling of isolation, that feeling of loneliness, to go back to the point that you've just made, by having that conversation, it was lifted. It really was. And it took us a few months together to work through what we're going to do, how we're going to get, and I say, I've just noticed myself saying that it wasn't I. It wasn't I or me, it was we, it was together. It was that really solid unit of going, how are we going to help, how are we going to get through this, what are we going to do? And I'm very lucky that I had that support, that I had that family, and I know not everybody does. But I think, going back to the point that you made before, Danny, is that whether you have your own physical family or support network or not, there is a support network out there, and there's people, there's organizations, there's peer support groups, there's groups of people, whether that's men, women, mixed, who can help be that support network for you. And that's why,
sorry,
no, I was going to say, and that's why what we wanted to do with the Hub of Hope was to show people that other support that was out there, the alternative. It doesn't have to be going on a waiting list and just waiting there. There's groups, there's people, there's whatever you're into, whether that is football, whether that's something else, there's something related to your interest that will have people who can help you and be that support network for you.
So when you had, when everything had happened and everyone coalesced around you and offered you all the support, what were the next steps for you? How did you go from where you were then at as you've said, your lowest point you could ever possibly be, to where you are today. And I know that's a long, ongoing, never-ending journey, which is for everyone. But how did you go from where you are to where you were to where you are now? What did you do? And
Yeah, well, do you know what? I think there's a couple of milestones. One of them was being honest. And being honest with those closest to me who I felt supported with. As I said, that was mostly my girlfriend, who's now my wife, and the parents and a couple of close friends. It was us then working out what we're going to do, taking it day by day, taking time off to work on myself, to rest, to it's to have medication, to do whatever I needed to do. And we just, there was no formula that we followed. We just got through that together, and we worked out day by day.
did I did.
But the biggest turning point for me was there's another milestone, was that one of my closest friends, who I spoke to every single day, had heard about what I'd gone through and messaged me and said that he was on antidepressants. And for me, that was a moment when I was like, how do we talk every day? How do we be best mates from when we're little?
Yeah.
And you're going through something and I'm going through something we didn't
Yeah.
know. And that helped, because he said it in person. We never said it in person again, but we started texting about it, and that gave me someone I could talk to, who wasn't my girlfriend, who wasn't my mum or dad. Coming back to the point that you made about your wife before, somebody else I could talk to. But probably the biggest turning point was that when I started to speak publicly about it, and when I say speak publicly, I just put it on social media. But when people started coming to me saying, I feel the same way, and I mean hundreds of people started coming to me saying they felt the same way, it gave me a purpose.
Yeah.
It gave me a fire in my belly. It showed me an injustice, and it gave me a purpose to go, right, this is what you can do. Because I think I was struggling for like who I was, what my life was, what my ambition was, what my goal was. And this gave me this real purpose to go and make a difference. Go and make a difference to these people's lives. And that purpose from 10 years ago has driven me every single day. Every day. Like, you walk into the Chasing Stigma office now, and we have a neon sign that says, remember who all of this is for. And every single day that drives me, because there's people, and there's people that you will know, there's people that you won't know, but there are millions of people all going through almost the exact same thing at the exact same time, feel like they're the only ones. So that purpose and that drive is what has really taken me from that low to being where I am today, which is married with 2 kids, living a life I never believed that I would ever live.
So, like, it sounds to me like, the sort of the thing that you thought was holding you back has actually catapulted you into, where you are now, for want of a better, metaphorically. And I read a thing about, like an arrow has to be drawn back before it flies forward. And that's like what's, what you've said to me is, when you're talking, that I'm seeing that in my head, that the thing that you think's been holding you back, and has, the minute you've let it go, has gone poof, and you've gone, you've just flown further than you could ever imagine.
It's a perfect analogy, to be honest, because I'm without a doubt stronger as a person for the experience. And I might have had these ambitions 10 years ago that were completely different, but this, every day I come into work knowing that we can make a difference, feeling energized, feeling driven, feeling like we're making a difference to other people's lives. If you'd have asked me 10, 15, 20 years ago, what are you going to do for your job? My God, never in a million years would I think this. But something's happened, we've used it, and we are powering through, and we're making a massive difference.
So earlier on, you mentioned that about you go to the gym and you use physical exercise to help your mental. So physical health helps build your mental health. So what are your day-to-day, routines that have, keep you where you are now? Because, like, one of the analogies I use is like mental health's like physical health. So you don't just go to the gym once and come out this physical specimen who's perfect. And, you know, the people that, you know, when I see people that are, you know, physically fit, I look at them and I go, fair play, mate. You've worked hard for that. It doesn't come to you. And the mental health's the same. You know, I work on mine every day. So I've spent last 7-10 years getting to know myself.
Yeah.
And like sometimes my mum will say to me, well, but it's all right for you, talking about, you know, how I deal with stuff here. And I say, Mum, it's not. I've just been given this. I work on this every day to be able to compartmentalize, segment, and deal with, and know what triggers are, and know how to, you know, not how to deal with things that go on. So what are your, you know, day-to-day mechanisms, practices, rituals that keep you in the shape you're in?
Yeah, but you know what? I think sometimes it's the boring and the mundane, but that's me. I think, you know, I'm a big I'm a home bird.
Yeah,
And I love routine, and I love that being that home bird and those home comforts. Taking my kids to school of a morning, if I can. Sometimes I need a little, almost something to ground me, almost a reset for me. If I start feeling overwhelmed, you know, if there's weeks or whatever when I feel overwhelmed, I pick my kids up from school. You know, seeing the kids smile when I turn up at school does so much for me. But it's the other mundane almost, but the routines of cooking the tea of a night. You know, cooking the tea of a night might seem like a task, might seem like a chore, but for me, it's time on my own to just concentrate, to concentrate on something that's not work, concentrating on cooking, and just having that time to do that. Going to the gym as much as I can, running as much as I can. Just having even, you know, we're talking on a podcast about football, but going to the match for me is, you know, I'm an Everton fan, so it's not enjoyment, but it's it's an opportunity to go to shout, to scream, to sing, to, you know, when you actually say those things out loud, it seems weird, doesn't it? It seems weird. A grown man going, I go there to sing and shout and scream and be in that moment, and then I come home and I leave that match. I used to take that home with me. I used to like let that bother me, but now it's, I go to match, I do whatever, and then I leave it. And but for me, that is part of that well-being. It's part of that.
Football, and like I think anyone that is involved in football gets that totally.
Absolutely.
You know, it's a release. You know, going to watch a professional game, going to watch your team on a weekend. It gives you that release, and we all release that release in different ways. So for you, you know, it's like, you know, like most of us, shouting, screaming, singing, letting off everything go. For some people, you know, for myself as well, I'll just sit and like analyze the game while I'm watching it. And when I played football as a you know, when I was younger, football just gave me that release. That the point that this minute I walked over that line for 90 minutes, I didn't think about anything. Literally, because I was too knackered, and I was so focused on football. And like, one thing that I saw in the pandemic was when football stadiums were shut, you know, the levels of people struggling were through the roof, and I saw it firsthand, because, you know, and a lot of them are, you know, blokes. I'm not being sexist here, but the majority of people in a football stadium are, you know, males my age, shall I say. And same, you know, and I'm not saying, you know, that ladies display different behaviour at football. You know, they'll get involved and stuff like that. But people didn't have that release, you know. So people might work all week, you know, doing the job and think, right, I've got to the weekend, you know, like some people, like you said, drinking to get over stuff, or to release stuff, or to mask stuff. People will work all week, football at weekend. This is my release. This is my enjoyment. Absolutely. I'm meeting people that I've maybe sat next to for 10 years that I didn't know before. You know, I got my season ticket and stuff like that. And so I think, anyone that is involved in football gets that, Jake, totally, you know.
And you're right, like, you know, I've got a season ticket at Everton. There's a lad next to me who's from Leicester. There's a lad the other side of me who comes from Swindon, and I didn't know them, you know, and now, you know, I call them friends. But you can also go and be next to somebody, and just for that 90 minutes, you can be you can be best mates with them for that time. I've got a poster on my wall which is of when Everton beat Crystal Palace to stay up, and I get stick for it. Somebody came in the other week and was giving me stick for it, saying, "Oh, you know, you're framing a game about staying up, like that's your achievement." But you know what? For me, football is about moments, and football's given me some of the biggest and most enjoyable moments of my life. It's not about winning trophies, and you know, it'd be great if we were. But for me, football's given me some of the biggest moments, and that game in particular, I've never felt relief like that in my life. I've never felt it, and it was a moment where I was with my dad at the game. It was just, football is about those moments, and those moments happen whether that is in the Champions League or whether that is grassroots football. It is about moments. And so for me, one of the biggest things that I will, and you know what, it's a conversation that I've never even had with my wife. You know, we've got 2 kids. My wife is self-employed. I was self-employed and then working for the charity, and you know, money is been difficult and hard to come by at times. But it's never a conversation that we ever had about don't get your season ticket, because I think I've always been lucky that she's always known that's what I need. That's the me time. And I go and I come back and I've had that release and that relief. So yeah, football for me is a big part of that coping mechanism.
But that's it. When you said then about don't not get your season ticket, that, and like, you know, we're going through cost of living crisis and bills are up, and you know, football stadiums are still full because of that reason, Jake. And people think it's not about football, actually. You know, football's more than just 11, 22 blokes kicking a ball on a pitch, isn't it? You know, it's about that community within a community. It's about the things that football gives you. And like, I think it's a bit of a paradox, is football, because it's so enjoyable, but yet it can be the most stressful thing on earth. You know, like, you go back to that Crystal Palace game. I can't imagine that any of that game you enjoyed, apart from after final whistle. And so you go into football to enjoy it. And actually, and I've done it, you know, I'm watching England and I'm like, you're literally like shitting yourself constantly until final whistle's gone, and you're either then elated or gutted. And it's a bit of a paradox, is football, in some respects, because sometimes you don't enjoy it, if you know what I mean, but you love it.
That's it. But then, you know, going back to the point that you made before, like there was a time with Everton in particular, even before last year or the year before, when it wasn't enjoyable, but you were going because you weren't going for the football. You're going for the community, you're going for the people, you're going to meet people before, meet people after. And I think that was, you know, I said earlier, I used to take the result home with me. And I think that was because what I used to do is I used to go to the match for kick-off and then go home, and I'd live with that result. When actually what I started doing, and as I kind of got a bit older, I started meeting people before. The match was irrelevant. I'd meet people after. And then and you'd moan about it or whatever. And then you've had that community, and I think creating a community, as I said, whether that's professional football, whether that is amateur football, whether that's playing, whether that's standing on the sidelines. I just think that there's a massive power when it comes to sport, and there's a power with sport, particularly with uniting people and having conversations about mental health. By sharing a common ground and in a non-clinical environment. So I think I'm a huge believer in using sport as a mechanism to try and reach more people.
This is my point. I say to professional football clubs and football in general, is that football has a duty to its stakeholders to support them with other things, mental health though, because you know, a club, you know, go back to Everton, a club carries so much weight and influence in that community, and they've got the perfect vehicle to support people with a mental health, because it's like when the clubs talk, when the players talk, what fans listen, and that's people from kids our age to blokes older than me. Hang on every word that club and those players say. They've got and football's got such a, I think, such a power, such a privileged position to help people with their mental health. And that's, you know, similar to what you've done with the Hub of Hope. You've seen something. I saw it with football and thought, well, use football as a vehicle to educate and support people with their mental health, and people will get involved with it. So just to sort of, you know, get to the end of where we are, Jake, and it's been brilliant, mate. I could sit and listen all day. Thank you. Could you give us some tips then on just some tips, simple, actionable, everyday tips that listeners of this podcast, people involved in football, you know, from every level, could undertake in their daily lives just to help them, you know, sort of maintain and build their mental health?
Yeah, I think you touched on a point before about physical health and how we kind of often see our physical health as something that we can look after every day and something that, you know, we're in control of, to do the things to look after it. And we should be having that same approach with our mental health.
Yeah.
Not only are the two completely linked and related, but, you know, you should be looking at your mental health as, one, something that you have, and two, an aspirational thing to be, you know, mentally healthy.
Yes.
And it is different for everyone. So, you know, I'm not going to say everyone should go for a run, because, you know, there's some people who can't do that. There's some people who would absolutely hate that. It might be the worst thing for the mental health. But what I would say is, you mentioned lockdown before, and I think during lockdown, I think people started to become a little bit more aware of the things that they needed to do every day that kind of they look forward to. And I think during lockdown, we all probably became a lot more aware of the benefits of getting outside and going for a walk, or you know, seeing friends and having that connection with people, whatever that might have been. So I would just say that I'd say that people probably already know what is good for them, but they don't necessarily link it. They don't necessarily think about it. So for me, you know, as I said, for me, a routine is a big thing. Sleep is so important for people's mental health and keeping them as mentally healthy as possible. But what I would say is, look at what those golden nuggets were, and what that might be for you. That might be, you know, things that you think that you don't have time for anymore, playing guitar or reading or whatever. You might think that you don't have time for it, but you absolutely do. So what is right for you can be different, but it could be Netflix, it could be going to the gym, it could be anything. But I would say that you probably know yourself more than anybody does.
Yeah.
And you need to just be a little bit in tune with yourself to go, am I feeling okay?
Yeah.
And what you would do if you were talking about your physical health, it's maybe a little bit easier, a little bit more ingrained within us to say, I'm not feeling well.
Yeah.
But if you felt not well with your physical health, you would do certain things to look after it. You might have water, you might take paracetamol, you might take a day off, you might go outside, you might just chill. And we need to have that same type of approach when it comes to our mental health. So just be that little bit in tune with yourself. Ask the question, stop from time to time, just stop and just think and just say, am I feeling okay? Am I feeling tired? Am I feeling not myself? Am I feeling like a bit cloudy? Whatever that might be. And then think about the things that you could be doing to look after it. Have the Hub of Hope on your phone, because there will be things that you can do every day to look after your mental health. But if there's things that you start thinking, I might need a little bit more than this, then go and get the help and support. Don't wait. What are you waiting for? You don't have to wait until you're really bad before you start reaching out for that help and support. Get the help and support as early as you possibly can. That could be texting, that could be going to a group, that could be something online, that could be stuff that you're doing. It could be absolutely anything. But look for the help and support as early as possible, because that can prevent things becoming worse and worse. So just try and take that time to stop, be a little bit more in tune with yourself, and work out what works for you. But this is a daily thing. It's absolutely every day check in, every day work out where you are, and every day work out what works and what doesn't work for you.
Jake, spot on. Thank you so much. Jake Mills, founder of the Hub of Hope. It has been an absolute pleasure, my friend. I've really enjoyed it. Thanks so much for your time. It's been a cracker. Can you just remind us where we can find the Hub of Hope, please, and give us a little brief breakdown of what Chasing the Stigma is, because you've spoke about it, but we don't know what that is.
So Chasing the Stigma is a national mental health charity. We have a couple of things. So we've got the Hub of Hope, which is a national directory of mental health services of all different kinds for all different people. So from younger people to older people, NHS services, private charities, peer support groups. You can find that on your wherever you get your apps normally, or you can go on hubofhope.co.uk. We also have Ambassador Hope training program, which is a training program that we developed ourselves at Chasing the Stigma, which is written from a lived experience point of view and delivered from a lived experience point of view. And we're doing a lot of other work as well. So you can find more information about the charity at chasingthestigma.co.uk, or we're on all social media as well.
Brilliant. Jake Mills, thanks so much. Absolutely class.
Thank you.
Cheers, buddy.